1. At my last job, my boss Kay hated me. She turned everything into a competition. She mocked me publicly, she took credit for my work, she divulged my personal medical information in front of all our co-workers. She was cruel, and needless to say, I avoided her as much as I could. So, now that the stage is set, here's the context. End of 2020, coronavirus blazing. I had just had my first baby. I was a nervous wreck my entire pregnancy, working from home and being extra careful. After maternity leave, which was disgustingly short by the way, I had returned to the office with some precautions set in place. My boss became crueler to me over those first few weeks back, and suddenly announced that regardless of any negative feelings towards it, she had decided we all had to attend this training in another state. Keep in mind that there were mandatory 2-week at-home quarantines in place for anyone coming back to my state, but my boss fully planned on ignoring those quarantines and demanding we would all return to the office as soon as we got back. I was carrying a heavy workload and pulling a lot of the weight around the office, and I had some rank, so I felt fully comfortable expressing my deep concerns to Kay, telling her that it was peak COVID season and that I had a newborn baby to worry about now. I expressed I simply didn't feel comfortable getting in the middle of a global pandemic and asked if there was a remote training I could attend instead. She firmly, adamantly, insisted there was no remote training and informed me that I could quit if I was that upset with her decisions. It's important to note that she insisted this for weeks, even claiming to have contacted the training organization to make sure. I decided on the spot after that meeting that I would be quitting. But I needed to check my boxes first, which took me a few weeks to figure out. Sometime after this meeting, and her incessant insistence that there was no remote training, it finally occurred to me to check with the organization putting on the training and ask them to clarify if there was truly remote training or not. I did, and lo and behold, there was. And they had been offering it for months. I asked them to email this information to me. Now, to figure out how to use this valuable information, right? Wrong. As soon as I stepped back into the office, Kay starts fake empathizing with me out of nowhere, in front of all our co-workers, saying she really wished she didn't need to force me to go to this training. So I said, if you feel so bad, let me go to the remote training. She looked at me in surprise, and her face turned beet red. Before she could fight me, I pulled up the email with that information and read it aloud in front of all our co-workers. No one said anything, they just stared, wide-eyed at her while she blubbered like a fool. Long story short, after pulling that fast one on her, I pulled her into a private meeting and gave my notice. She was horrified because, as I stated prior, I carried a lot of the work around that office. But like she said, I could quit if I didn't like her decisions. 2. In 2000, I was hired by a company in the construction industry. In 2002, they asked me to help start a new division of the company. They are the owners and the general manager. The general manager made it known he had a bug up his butt for me after my first year. Intermittent little digs, flippant attitude, demeaning, etc. Cut to after we got the new division up and running, and I request being able to start a web presence. Ownership is all over the endeavor, while the general manager brushes me off and says, "It's your division, do what you want." My division functioned with a separate business name. As I'm purchasing the domain name, my thoughts turn to the mothership and how it has zero web presence. Checked out and lined up the actual 2 business names and several close permutations, so they would be somewhat secure in knowing their business names couldn't be taken out from under them. I go to the general manager and ask for a check from the main company to pay for the domain names, and he, again, brushes me off saying, "It's your division. Do what you want." That was his favorite line. "You got a credit card, expense it like everything else." I did start to ask, "Are you sure you want me to put it on my personal—" and he was curtly cut off. By 2004, my division was running a 44% profit margin, which netted $7,500 a year. In its first 6 months of running, I had already paid back the build-out, training, machines, equipment, all the startup and setup. That is how successful this division was. The general manager became jealous of my achievements and tried to seize control over operations, citing he was the general manager of the entire company, whereas prior, it was my division. Do what I wanted. Each horn in by him, I'd deflect and defend my division. By 2005, I'd had enough and ended up quitting, as I'd heard he was preparing to fire me to fully seize the shiny penny as his own and take all the credit. I planned ahead, saved money, quit, and took 6 months off. It was a spring to fall extravaganza of doing whatever the heck I chose. Good times, good frickin' times. About a year later, I can't remember exactly how long, a charge appeared on my credit card for my former company's domain names. Being for several, the amount stood out like a sore thumb. I called and verified the charge and who and what it was for, and in my conversation with a very nice person, they said, "Yes, Mr. X, all these names are registered to you." About 3 years after I had left the old company, my phone rings and guess what number pops up on the screen? Oh yeah, I let that go to voicemail. The message was from the bookkeeper asking if I could return their call. Next day, here they try again, but straight to voicemail they go. After a week of messages, they were now pleading me to call them back. I returned the bookkeeper's call. Well, the cat came out of the bag, and the main company finally decided to build out a web presence, and it shelled out a ton of money to do so. Think online catalog, interactive web page, all the things we expect now. But were high-tech then, and were just coming into functional reality. Lo and behold, when they went to get their beautiful.com up and functioning, their exact name was taken, as well as a string of similar ones they could have used had I not snatched them up. The bookkeeper asked me to release the names to them. I indicated that would be very easy to do. It's a simple matter of signing them off, no? They agreed, as their anxious web builder had prepped them for the chat with me. I said I'd be happy to turn the keys to the kingdom over to them, but I wanted a few things. Reimbursed for all expenses up until that point for owning the domain names. A finder's fee, that pissed them off, but what can I say? I was yelled at to put their domain names on my personal credit card, and the general manager himself would have to hand-deliver the check. That third line item was a sticking point, but dear Mr. Manager was forced to bend the knee. I mean, I certainly wasn't going to budge. General Manager shows up at the appointed place, hands me the check, and barks at me about returning their domain names to them today. He did this so loudly, people in the coffee shop we met at turned and stared. I laughed and said, "After the check clears." "Sure, yeah." He balked and insisted I immediately transfer the names to them, as I was holding up the entire show. As I left, I smiled and said, "You're to blame here. You yelled at me to put the domain names on my credit card." He was absolutely fuming at this point. Besides, I love taking your advice to do what I want. Remember? And I am. 3. I was working for a manufacturer years ago. It was a small operation run by a husband, the CEO, and wife with the sister business of a front-end platform that was run by the wife's brother. The husband's mom and some cousins also worked there between the two businesses. With an operation like this, you had the typical micromanagement from CEO, minimum wage pay for top-dollar performance expectations, and the general nonsense you can expect in a setup like this. I had this job while in college and needed to build my resume. They let me have a flexible schedule so I could leave early for my night classes and when I had midterms and finals, so I knew I had to stick it out. After about 6 months of working there, my job responsibilities grew tremendously, but my salary did not. There was a high turnover rate in the office. From the we're a family environment, that meant actual family got special treatment, and everyone else was expected to do a crazy amount of work without getting any credit. One of my friends, Katie, was looking for work, and my company was hiring. I told her what she was getting into, but as a recent college grad looking for office experience, she decided to give it a shot. First, my referral bonus never came in, after she had worked there for 90 days, and I was told that I shouldn't inquire about it because I referred someone to help the company. not to get the extra money. I wasn't in a position to push, so I didn't. I trained Katie in her role as she was taking some of my old responsibilities. Well, the CEO and wife didn't like how much time the two of us spent talking to each other, or how much time we spent away from our desks, which was genuinely using the restroom and getting water. This made no sense because I handled product onboarding and Katie suggested products for curated events, so it was important that she knew what new products were coming out and when she could start promoting them, so that stock wouldn't sit in the warehouse. We separately had meetings with the CEO and office manager, putting us on probation for this behavior. Cue malicious compliance. We stopped talking as much in the office, effectively cutting me off from curated events and making it impossible for Katie to use our new products on the upcoming events. Events could be scheduled anywhere from a week to several months in advance, so it was a great way to boost sales and visibility for our new items. My friend ended up getting fired for having a brain and questioning some of the stupid policies. Also for doing something so outrageous as taking her unpaid lunch hour, showing up at 9 and leaving at 5. Oof. Normally I would have gone back into the platforms to curate events until they found someone to take over the role, but I was petty. I had been there for a little over a year. I was training employees, teaching myself the ins and outs of all our retailers' backends to upload products, coordinating with our factories overseas, the freight companies, and our warehouse so that products would be live as soon as we had stock, and was still getting paid like I did for the minimal role I had when I got hired. So not my job, not my problem. Fast forward a few months. The CEO decides to show up to work on the office floor instead of working out of his private office. Whenever he was on the floor, he was always super loud and disruptive to the general flow. I hear him talk about sales from the past few months, specifically about sales from events, so naturally my ears perk up. He starts getting louder.
I don't get it. There's this huge decline in sales. None of our new products are getting any traction.
I haven't been addressed, so I keep tapping away at my computer and act oblivious. He calls over the office manager and they start hashing it out.
6 months ago, the sales for our new items went down significantly.
I'm thinking, yeah, duh, that's when you told me and Katie to stop talking. The initial data that was supplied with product photos and descriptions weren't clear, and it would have been a very long process for Katie to sift through the new products to try to match them to events, as opposed to what we used to do, which was she would tell me the theme and what she was looking for, and I'd get her the data on a short list of items, and could review to match said events, as opposed to dumping 100 products on her.
Then 3 months ago, they became almost non-existent. Sales have dropped almost 70% with these events.
3 months ago is when Katie got fired. Eventually, the two of them piece together that they need to blame whoever is curating events, and the CEO starts talking to everyone in the office. Whose responsibility is it to work on events? Finally, it gets to a point where I can't stay quiet. The office is too small, and I play too big of a role in product management, so I chime in, "Oh, wasn't that Katie's responsibility?" CEO replies,
"She hasn't worked here in 3 months. You mean to tell me no one has been submitting products for 3 months?
He's livid, and it's clear that I am now in the path of his rage.
Why has no one been handling this?
Everyone is kind of looking around, and the office manager, Karen, starts shifting the blame onto me, since technically Katie was in my department. Once the finger-pointing started, I was prepared to defend myself. Well, Karen, I thought you were the one who was in charge of managing and keeping track of every employee's role.
I am, but you knew this is an important part of our sales marketing.
The week before Katie was let go, didn't you specifically get all her passwords and a complete list of all her tasks?
Yes.
She's clearly concerned with where I'm going with this. And after she was let go, did you communicate to me that those tasks were now my responsibility?
Well, no, but I shouldn't have had to.
But you're in charge of delegating tasks and making sure all work is assigned to employees. Are you implying that I was supposed to know you had a list of tasks unassigned? Why would I assume you didn't delegate those to another team member, when that's an essential part of your role? Needless to say, Karen was very annoyed with me, but I wasn't taking the fall. They didn't ask me to curate events, Karen handled that, which got them to hire another person very quickly because it was too much work for her on top of her other duties. Katie, for those wondering, is doing well. After she got fired, she was able to collect unemployment. She had a job since high school and worked all through college, so she took advantage of getting paid to look for work, which was especially nice since it was on the company's dime. She has a job now as an office manager for a company that has a few different branches in our area. 4. A few years ago, I worked at a pharmacy and convenience store as a shift manager. Think CVS or Rite Aid or Walgreens. I won't say which for secrecy reasons. We had a pretty chill boss who was let go for not meeting certain metrics arbitrarily set by corporate. Surprise, guess where this is going. We got an assistant manager from another store as a new boss, and he's very good at his job. But corporate is stonewalling all his new hires. We're supposed to have 4 shift managers and 6 to 10 cashiers. We did not. The new guy lasts 7 months and quits. He's been with said company for about 13 years. Even my vendors thought I was lying when I said he'd quit. In the interim, we'd lost 2 cashiers. We had managed to get a shift from another store who said it was too stressful, so she quit. And then another who also said, I can't do this, and went back to his previous job. And this is just front end. By the way, all Shift Plus people have to be Pharmatech certified, so if the pharmacy gets behind, because we had some nursing student college kids who could only do seasonal work, etc., so our workforce there was not very stable. The pharma had to pull us from the front to go count pills. Wonderful to go from 2 to 1 registers with 9 people in line. So, with that story in mind, we get into the meat of the story. We get this new hotshot district manager who wants to reinvent the wheel. She asks the remaining 2 competent shifts what she can get for us, and she promises everything. She tried for a bit, but man, she started getting super petty. I asked if she could quit getting pulled back to the pharmacy so frequently, because we're behind on customers and photolab and stocking shelves and all the other stuff. And she goes, oh no, you can't do that. Pharmacy makes 80% of our money. Then I asked if we could close on Sunday because the pharmacy is closed on Sunday. She scoffs at me and says, oh, we can't do that. That would be silly. Then I asked if we could match the store hours to pharmacy hours, because the pharmacy opens later and closes earlier. And we're super understaffed. She scoffs and says, oh, no, we can't do that. That would be silly. If you're sensing a trend yet, yeah. This lady is the kind who almost broke a $6,000 printer because she didn't know how to release the latch on a discard tray. Yeah. Anywho, our biggest priority was getting a new boss, and maybe we could get it together. She promises me and the other remaining shift that she can do that. A week goes by, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We're falling further and further behind. I picked up scheduling, my other co-worker picked up all the invoices and inventory, no extra pay. And finally, the straw that broke the camel's back. I had a 5-day vacation that I had planned before boss number 2 quit, and she texted me saying if I could work through my vacation, even though I would be out of state, had already booked tickets with my friends, a hotel room, so ended up walking out and left her a very polite note saying, I'll miss you guys. It was fun at times. Also, Karen, go fuck yourself. She texts me the morning after the note and says if I want to talk to her, I can still keep my job. This company, instead of doing COVID bonuses, did $200 in-store credit. And they had not deactivated my employee account. This takes a few weeks. I know, I've had to do it, and totally above my pay grade. Anyways, I go in the next afternoon, she's behind the counter, very pissed off, and I go over and pick up the most expensive electronics I can with my friend, and throw them on the counter, and use up my points. The company gets $0 on the in-store credit purchases, so we wiped out their electronics section, completely legally, at their loss. The face she made when she was ringing us up was beyond priceless. Oh, and she got fired like 3 weeks later. Moral of the story, don't piss off your competent employees. 5. I'm a 32-year-old female, work part-time at a pet store to supplement my income, as my salary of a full-time teacher doesn't always pay the bills. Plus I have a few pets, and 20% off in-store purchases is rather helpful. Anyway, one of the things we supply are live and frozen feeder animals for things like reptiles, certain aquatic creatures, and invertebrates. These include things like mice, rats, dubia roaches, bloodworms, mealworms, waxworms, superworms, and crickets. The mice and rats are either frozen or live, but either way they're easy to count and box up for the customer. Dubia roaches, mealworms, waxworms, and superworms are pre-packaged and price-marked, but the crickets are not. Crickets are kept in these large containers with mesh top, egg cartons for the crickets to climb and hide in, cricket food, and hydration. This means when customers ask for crickets, which we usually sell by the dozen, we have to count and retrieve them manually, while putting them in a plastic bag. We then fill with air and tie off to go with the customer. Our method for transferring the crickets is to lightly tap the egg cartons over a funnel-like object that doesn't have a hole at the bottom. We tap the crickets in, wrap the plastic bag around the mouth of the funnel, then tip it and lightly tap the crickets into the bag. Some crickets jump in out of order or cling to others, so often customers are given bonus crickets, which we're okay with. It's better than shorting them. So customers are always given the right amount, or often more than what they asked for without an increase in price. Most people get this. The customer in this story did not. A woman comes in and she asked for 4 dozen crickets, 48 total. I went to the back, tapped the crickets from the cartons into the funnel, and then counted them into the bag. As per usual, the occasional extra cricket tumbled or hopped in, probably putting the total a bit over 50 by the time I was done. I bagged them, tied the bag, then took them to the counter. Now, I don't know if this woman was having a bad day or if she'd been stiffed by another store in the past, but she demanded that we count out the crickets in front of her before she paid for them. I explained that it was likely that she got more than what she asked for, and counting out 48 crickets individually would take a little while. She insisted. She wanted to be sure we weren't ripping her off. So I got one of those small plastic critter keepers and a pair of tongs. I opened the bag, making it deflate and slightly more painful to work with, and inserted the tongs. Delicately, so not to crush the crickets. I grabbed each one with the tongs and started counting slowly so not to crush the crickets with the tongs, or lose my place while counting, something I do struggle with, and dropped each individually counted cricket into the critter keeper. So after about 5 to 10 minutes at the counter, meticulously counting crickets with tongs, and maybe deliberately taking a little bit longer than I had to, out of spite, a line was building up behind the woman, and I was getting close to the end of my count. Eventually, I hit the grand total of what she paid for, 48 crickets. And wouldn't you believe it, there were 10 left over in the bag. Almost a whole extra free dozen she would have gotten had she not asked me to count. I said, "Oh, would you look at that, my mistake. You were right, I did miscount. I'll put these other ones back and ring you up for the 48. I'll be right back." And before she could protest, I wandered off to dump the last 10 crickets back into the cricket container. When I came back to check her out, she was silent, not looking at me, did her best to ignore the irritated looks of the customers lining up behind her, while I poured her 48 crickets back into a plastic bag. She paid, then slunk off sheepishly, out the door without a thank you or a glance back. I then got through the rest of the line quickly and apologized to the customers in line for the wait. I sent them home with some free samples, thanked them for their patience, then continued along with my shift. She never complained, and she did return to the location several times after. She never asked anyone to count crickets again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 235, and thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. For those of you who are fans of Revenge is Ice Cream, there is now a Revenge is Ice Cream Archives podcast you can find up on Spotify, and I'll also whack that up on YouTube at some point when I have a moment to make it. Just 2 episodes so far, but I'm uploading new ones every 5 days, so Spotify and YouTube. Those are the 2 places you can find it, whichever is most convenient for you. Sorry, my throat sounded a bit rough there. Let's see. Let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Oh, wait, no. We have a little bit of business. We have a late birthday shout-out to do. This one's sort of my fault, sort of Gmail's fault, in that the request went straight to my spam email folder, which doesn't usually happen with most of my emails. But I did find that, and there was also a glitch story someone sent me in there. So those have been retrieved, and they're where they belong. So my birthday shout-out goes to Donnie, a.k.a. Tortoise. And they were 18 years old a few days ago. So a very happy birthday to you, Donnie. And as I am the king of birthdays, I'm waiting on my crown to arrive. It's off at the jeweller's. Getting diamond marshmallows installed. Should be here soon enough. But as I am the king of birthdays, I have decided that you can celebrate for a whole extra month, since you did get shortchanged by having your birthday at the end of February. And before I go, I'd like to sing happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Donnie. Happy birthday to you. Alrighty, and before we go, I think we'll have Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, this one comes from my moderator, Shagar. And this one, let's see. Your old gran asks you to clean up her attic because she heard a noise. You climb up. Would you rather see 100 spider-sized people that can talk, or a single person-sized spider that can't talk? Speaking personally, I'd much rather the 100 spider-sized people, because at least you can talk to them and ask them to keep the noise down. A giant person-sized spider that can't talk is presumably just going to act like a spider. Well, that might be dangerous. I would call the giant spider Bob, though, and get him a hat. Maybe we could go on adventures together if he's peaceful. Anyway, let me know what your answer is in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.